Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode I'm joined by co-host Phil Lindsey. From the world of 90s television comes one of the funniest sitcoms of all time, featuring a young hip-hop star on the rise, transplanted into a world that's unfamiliar to him, but one that he must navigate with the help of his extended family, who are there to help him learn life's lessons in one hilarious and heartfelt moment after another. We're talking about the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air starred Will Smith as a young kid growing up on the streets of Philadelphia who was sent by his mother to live with his aunt and uncle in Bel-Air, California. Loosely based on the life of music manager Benny Medina, the show was the breakout role for Smith. The series was initially pitched to Will by Medina, but Smith was reluctant to say yes due to having no acting experience. Smith was later invited to a party of famed music producer Quincy Jones' house, where he was encouraged by Jones to audition for the show on the spot. The television executives in attendance were impressed by Smith, and the deal was signed that night. The show features Will as a fictionalized version of himself, a character whose antics often cause problems for his Uncle Phil and Aunt Vivian Banks. Phil and Viv's daughters Ashley and Hillary are also in the mix, as well as their son Carlton, who often serves as the comic relief to Smith. A new son, Nicky Banks, was introduced in Season 5. Jeffrey is the Banks' butler, and Smith's real-life best friend and music partner DJ Jazzy Jeff stars in a recurring role as Jazz. The show premiered on NBC on September 10, 1990, and was met with positive reviews from critics and fans alike. It was praised for its comedy and for Smith's performance, which was a pleasant surprise for many who didn't know if the young rapper would be able to deliver in his new role. The series was also praised for its willingness to tackle some of the more serious topics facing the African American community, including police prejudice, white privilege, and overall racism in the country. Fans of the show believed it to be important for those reasons, and it was considered to be ahead of its time. Will Smith's star began to rise during the show's run, and it became obvious that he was headed for big things in Hollywood. Although the cast was fully supportive of him during his rise to fame, Smith faced some controversy after Season 3 of the show when the role of Aunt Viv was given to another actress. Though much of the blame was often thrown at others, Smith did not escape criticism and was often forced to defend himself to the press. Despite the controversy, the show continued on for 3 more seasons and remained a hit with audiences along the way. The show received numerous awards during its run and is highly regarded as one of the best sitcoms of all time. Although the series did serve as a launching pad for Will Smith's big screen career, the show still stands on its own and continues to have a loyal following. This led to a reunion of the original cast, which aired on HBO Max and featured current interviews as well as flashbacks to the show, which remains a favorite of fans all over the world. And that's the lowdown on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Parents Just Don't Understand came out in 1989. And I'd tell you my age, but I'm getting up there, so I'm going to save it. But I was not exactly a kid when this came out. Fine, I was 16 when this song hit. My God, it's been that long. Holy Lord, long time. So it was not the typical rap song, even for that period of time when rap was still all about who's the best MC, who's the best DJ, I've got the street cred, you don't, I rap better than you do. And when rap was just, from my perspective anyway, rap was just, it was Run DMC, it was, the Adidas and the tracksuits and everything was, I don't want to say more entertainment than anything else, but I guess I could say that. So 89, not far removed from that time period. So to me, it sort of fit in. It was lighthearted. It was different. I can't say I was a massive rap fan during that time, but I was a fan of DMC. And when I first heard Fresh Prince and DJ Jazzy Jeff, it was like, okay, like I said, this is different. The video was funny. It was pretty cool. And man, it was all over MTV. You could not turn on MTV without this video playing. And it was all over the radio. And it just became a song that it was part of the soundtrack of my existence at that time because I heard it so often. And it just kind of grew on me. If you had told me that this same guy was going to become one of the biggest movie stars of our time, I would have been like, sure, what else you got? I mean, I think a lot of people probably thought that. But at the time, how do you know until you know, right? So uh, it all starts with the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. That's where he really began to make his mark. That's where people looked at him as something besides just being a rapper, which was, to our credit, that's all we knew him as. We didn't know the level of talent that this guy had. Will Smith proved beyond the shadow of a doubt that, yeah, he's got it. He's got the it factor. He's got what it takes to not only to entertain, but to be successful in Hollywood. So how much was Will Smith, a.k.a. the Fresh Prince, and DJ Jazzy Jeff on your radar when they first came in, when they started hitting it big? Did you know them? Had you heard the song? I mean, I don't know that I know your age, if I'm being honest, Phil, so you might be schooling me here. So maybe a better question is, what was your first exposure to Fresh Prince and DJ Jazzy Jeff?
I believe my first exposure to Will is through the show. Um, like I knew he was a rapper through the show. But I don't think my first introduction to him was the music. I think I found out about the music, of course, after the show because the show came out in 1990, and I'm 35, so my birthday is June. So yeah, so I was 5 when the show first started.
I hate you so much.
So so yeah, my first introduction to him was through the show.
Well, that's fair enough. And honestly, there were guys a lot older than you that was their first introduction to him as well. And, I don't know what I expected at the time, man, if I thought this was just going to be a vehicle for his rap career, which I thought maybe a lot of people just assumed that. But it didn't take long until you kind of realize, wait a minute, that's not really what he's doing. Like, he would rap occasionally in the show, and they may have featured, like, I'm rewatching the show again right now. I'm like 21 episodes into the first season. And I'm reminded of how long network TV is. My God, I think there's 30 episodes in this season, man. It's a far cry from today's modern era of 8 episodes on a streaming platform, which is a lot more easily digestible, I guess you could say. But
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like other than the theme song, his music's not in the show that much. Like he has that one episode where his song is in the Halloween episode.
I think so.
And that's the only instance I can think of where his music's in the show.
It's so far from me rewatching it. Like I said, I'm only through season 1, 21 episodes, I think, so far. There's only been the one. Yeah. And there could be more peppered in somewhere. And it could be him just, doing the lyrics with no music behind it. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, again, I don't know if I expected it to be like I said, a vehicle for his career. But dude, you kind of think, wouldn't it make sense for this to be, hey, Will, to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, man, learn how to act, maybe make a career of this, maybe make a go of being an actor someday in Hollywood, and plus you can sell some more records, which I'm sure he did anyway by proxy, right?
Yeah, I'm sure. But I mean, the level of money and acclaim that he stepped into being on national television is just totally different than being a rapper from Philadelphia, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. And dude, one of the things I was struck by, and I watched this show when it first aired live, and I knew it then, but I guess I kind of forgot over the years because you just consume so much stuff, man. And like, I'm not gonna say I'd forgotten about the show, but when the reunion special came up on HBO Max, I'm like, oh yeah, the Fresh Prince, I'm gonna check that out. And we'll talk about the reunion special here shortly, I'm sure. But I was kind of reminded, really from the jump of the first episode of the pilot, of, man, the energy this guy had and the life and the sense of humor and just those scenes where he just starts dancing, like they just put on a song and he's just going for broke. And it's not, well, listen here, Will, this is what we think you should do. He's like, screw it, just put the music on, I'll do it myself. And he's just, man, all out. It's the most hilarious thing to see him. And you can hear because they did it for a live studio audience, right? So they're enjoying themselves. They're screaming and yelling. And God, dude, he's just so funny. But just that youth, just look at how young he was during that time. And man, just funny stuff. I mean, when you first started watching this show, were you hooked like right away? Did it have to grow on you, or were you just like, well, let's see what happens kind of thing?
Well, because of the timing of it, like there weren't at that time a whole lot of black sitcoms. Like there were, but like that was kind of like the almost renaissance, if you will, of black sitcoms, because there was that, and then Cosby Show was around the same time. But even like if you look at Cosby Show and you look at Fresh Prince, they're so different. Like it's such a different. I don't know how to explain, but Will brought a depiction of black youth to television that wasn't there before.
Mm.
And I mean, of course, you got some of that with the Cosby Show, but you know, most of the hook of the Cosby Show towards the beginning was Cosby, and Cosby's not like in touch with like the youth, and that's what made Fresh Prince so special in some ways. Just the culture that they brought. Like I said, it wasn't like he was like, okay, I'm gonna play my own music and try and put myself on. It was kind of like there were always these nods to what we were actually listening to and what people at the time were actually wearing. So yeah, I immediately connected. Like Fresh Prince was like a fixture in my house at the time. Like everybody I knew watched it.
You know, I'm glad you mentioned the fashion, which I'm sure we would have gotten there eventually, but the fact that he always looked the part, and it didn't hurt that his character was part of a wealthy family, that explains why he's always wearing clothes that look like they've never been worn, and they're brand new, and they're designer, and it's the fashion of the day, all the neon of the 90s, which I'd completely forgotten about. which has its good and bad points, because I'm a big Living Color fan. So those guys were doing the Oakley and the body glove and all the neon stuff when they first hit. So that kind of reminded me of that. But man, he always looked the part. He always looked great. The suits and the shirts, and I'd forgotten about all that, man, until I started watching the show again. Did the fashion of it like hit you when you watched it? Were you able to like, hey, wait a minute, man? He's like he'll wear a shirt in one episode and then never wear it again. He'll wear something completely different the next week.
I didn't recognize that until I got older, because like I said, when I first started watching it, I watched it in elementary school. So of course,
right.
you know, it was kind of like, oh, you know, you kind of look at Will, like Will is like what is considered cool on the show. So it's like, no, he always has like fresh gym shoes. He always has like the newest this. But, you know, at the same time, like I said, I was in elementary school and my family was nowhere near close to wealthy. So it wasn't
Right.
like I was dressing the same way. But I understood his impact on the culture and what he was actually doing the older and older I got.
You know, you mentioned the fact that it was one of like the renaissance of the black sitcom, because there weren't that many at that time. So the fact that the primary characters are part of a wealthy African American family, I'm sitting here trying to think, has there ever been a depiction like that before? Because you had the Jeffersons. I mean, it was pretty well known that George Jefferson was they lived what is it, a deluxe apartment in the sky on the Upper East Side, right? I remember the song. I'm singing the song in my head. But you could tell based on where they lived, based on how Wheezy dressed, that they were doing pretty well. He owned a chain of dry cleaners. But I don't know if they ever said he was rich. Maybe I'm not remembering that. So besides the Jeffersons, had there been a sitcom to that point where it's like, well, the Cosby Show, I mean, he was a doctor in the show, right? So
Right. He was a doctor and then Claire was a lawyer.
That's right.
So, you know, and then they lived in a brownstone in New York. So, I mean, you could put two and two together.
Right.
But I think, and I mean, I think the trappings of it and putting it around his wealthy relatives is one thing, but Will is not wealthy, because that's the thing. He's in this environment of wealth, but he's not wealthy. He comes from a different place. And I think that is part of what is the great dynamic of the show, of what he brings in terms of who, you know, he thinks he is as a down to earth kid from Philly. And, you know, you put that juxtaposition against like someone from Carlton or even Hillary.
Mm-hmm.
And even like right away his relationship with Ashley and just how she's enamored with him because, he's not anything. He's not like anyone else in their circle at the time.
And Will's your hook. He's your way in to the show. Because, yeah, right? Because had he grown up in that house, I mean, yeah, it's still funny. It's still a good show, but it's not, as pro wrestling guys, you and I have talked a lot before about how do you relate? How can someone in the ring relate to someone or make a person halfway around the world watching on their TV in their small home relate to that dude thousands and thousands of miles away? That's how you make connections. So your way in is Will to this show, because unless you come from money, which I didn't either, I couldn't relate to any of that, but Will's your way in. So that makes sense. I thought it was smart. I mean, the whole idea, and plus the thing is actually based on the story of Benny Medina. Am I getting the name right, I think?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. So had you heard the story of how the show came to be? Because I had not heard it until the reunion special.
I had not, and I think we talked before about like just the story that Will told in the reunion and just how crazy it was. I had never heard this story before. You
had told me that, hadn't you? I thought you had, yeah, because when I was watching the reunion special, it was hitting me. Okay, I haven't heard this, and I thought, have I not heard this? Didn't someone tell me this? So it probably was you at some point, but yeah, just crazy, man. He goes to this party at Quincy Jones' house, which, just to say I went to a party at Quincy Jones' house, that's pretty freaking big right away. I mean, of all people, right? Just freaking genius. And you go to this party at his house, and then, he's never taken acting lessons in his life. And he's like, they're pitching him this show. And he's like, well, he says, what do you need? And he's like, well, I need a couple weeks. Let me get some acting classes. He's like, look, everybody that can greenlight this show is in the next room. You got to go in there right now and kill it. Like, no pressure, right? But he went in there and killed it, man. I mean, just imagine how he'd been in there and just made a fool of himself. And they're like, yeah, this was fun, but I'm not seeing it. Man, the show wouldn't have happened, right?
Right. I mean, just that idea that he went in. It's just so many things that are interesting about the story. Just that they handpicked him, that he came in with nothing other than who he was, and just his genuine personality pushed the show forward. And I mean, that's true of how it got greenlit, and that's true of everything about the show once you watch it, because it's just so clear. Like, of course things are written for him and scripted, but he's just so natural on screen that you have to believe that this is just who he really is in real life.
And it doesn't feel like he's acting a lot of the times. I mean,
yes.
Even some of the dialogue, listen, let's just admit it. Watching the show back, some of the dialogue is kind of hokey, but you kind of expect that from a sitcom. It's not all going to be perfect one-liners every single time. I mean, that depends on what show you're watching to get those perfect one-liners, the perfect setup, and the perfect execution. There's some cheese in the show. It's not bad, but it's enough to make you go, oh, is this a sitcom? But, I mean, I thought everything that he did, for the most part, was pretty awesome. And you had to believe that. And they even said during the reunion special that they had gotten some input, that they were able to push back to the writers and sort of give their, like, here's my 2 cents of what I think my character would say right here, which I'm sure helps any actor, just like it helps any pro wrestler. It's like, hey, I'm the one out there doing it. Let me talk for myself. And it feels like that's what Will was doing through a lot of this show.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, if anybody had input, he did. I mean, because he was the star of the show. It was his show.
Oh, yeah. Without him, there is no Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Let's talk about the cast, because I hate to start off the conversation with this, but let me tell you what I thought when I saw the cast assembled on this Fresh Prince of Bel-Air reunion. When I saw them on the same room together, the first thing I said was, where's everyone been this whole time? Like, I don't know if you had that thought or not, but and maybe there's some careers happening that I'm not aware of, maybe behind the scenes, or maybe they've been keeping busy, but maybe not as actors. I don't know, but I sat there and started thinking, well, I don't really know if I know what anyone's been doing since the show ended. I mean, had you kept up with anyone or heard anything about any of the main cast since the show came to an end?
I had, I knew I knew some of them had like other TV shows after that, and then some of them like tried to do movie stuff. But the thing is, like, none of them did anything that reached the height of what Will did. So it's like it kind of looks it looks crazy because it looks like all of them are kind of standing still, and he's just like, continuing to ascend up and up and up.
Honestly, I like the way you put that. It's kind of the truth. It kind of feels like they're frozen. And honestly, they all look great, don't they?
Yes, yes. Everybody looked great. Everybody looked in like good spirits and everything. Um, yeah, it's just, I mean, one of the treats of the reunion is just seeing just how genuinely they care about each other,
Yeah.
and just seeing just how happy they were to be in the same room. And it's just kind of like, oh yeah, it still just has all that family vibe to it.
And I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'll tell you another thought I had watching this by the end of it, because of the fact that, like you said, they were all like instantly reconnected, just like you would with any family you hadn't been in the same room with for a long time. The minute you get back in the same room with them, well, this is family. We're okay. It's okay that I haven't seen you in a while. I still love you. You're still my brother. So they had that vibe. Man, I would love to see a new Fresh Prince show. And I would love to see, dude, it's 2020, the situation we're in. Put it on a streaming service, put it on HBO Max, put it anywhere you want to, but put Will Smith in the Uncle Phil role. Will Smith's all grown up. He's married with his own family. They take in a kid, they take in a nephew, they take in somebody, and the show is sort of, harmonizing with the original show. I think it would be I don't know. Maybe it'll never happen, but I think there's a lot of stuff there you can work with, and I think it would be great to see that, man.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting. I'm certain I could be wrong, but I think Will is the same age that James Avery was when he was playing the role when the show first started.
Interesting.
I think he is. I think they're around the same age. But yeah, I would be all for that. I've seen people talk about a reboot. There was this really cool trailer that somebody made of like a serious Fresh Prince, and it had like this dramatic tone to it.
Awesome.
And it looked really, really cool. Like, it sounds weird because comedy is such a big part of what made the show great.
Right.
But yeah, this trailer looked cool. Like, I was like, I would watch that.
Man, there's a lot of fan-made stuff out there, dude. You got to be careful because you don't know what you're getting into. You're like, oh my God, look, they're making a part 2. And all your friends are like, what? No, they're not.
Yeah, yeah. It was really well made. Like, I think at some point, Will shared it himself. Like, that's how far it got.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so cool. I'm definitely going to look that up when we get done here. Let's talk about the cast, and it's kind of starting off, I don't want to start off on a down note, but James Avery, of course, Uncle Phil, dude, freaking fantastic. I don't know who all maybe auditioned for the role. I've never, dove deep enough on this show to find out, what choice was James Avery to play the part, but we lost him in 2013, which feels like a lifetime ago at this point. But man, he was, and you and I talked before about casting in certain roles. I just can't envision anyone else being Uncle Phil.
Yeah, he just brought so much to the show. I mean, his comedic timing, his tone in all of the serious moments, his gravitas, like, he just brought so much to the role. And I mean, not just to the role, but just to the show. Like, the show just wouldn't be what it was without him.
And they made him such a strong character.
Yes.
Had the background with the civil rights movement. He talked about marching with Dr. King and just great stuff, man. I mean, it's just, it puts the character in a different perspective, and it shows you that this show's just putting itself out there. And you need a strong disciplinarian character if you're going to have Will Smith on the show. You kind of have to, right? He couldn't be everyone's favorite dad, because if he was, then Will's just going to run right over him. So
yeah, and I mean, I think the fantastic thing about Fresh Prince is, and I mean, like, you kind of see that with Family Matters, just as a comparison,
right,
that once Steve became the star of the show, everybody else kind of played off of him.
Yeah.
And but in this show, I never felt like Will overshadowed Uncle Phil or Aunt Viv. Like you could make the case that Aunt Viv was the female lead of the show at one point. Um, and I feel like most of the other characters, like they never seemed like they were just along for the ride.
Honestly, until you said it, man, I'd never really thought about that, but you're 100% right. Yeah, it could very well have become the Will Smith show, but it wasn't. It was the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air for a reason, because it wasn't just his story, it was the story of those around him as well. So, yeah, honestly, I'd never really thought about that, but you're totally right, man. He never really, as people would say, chewed up the scenery. He could if he wanted to, and he did at times, but yeah, I don't think it was ever to the detriment of anybody around him. I think that, yeah, his character was there, obviously, to get himself over, let's be honest, but like you said, playing off the other characters, meshing really well with people, and Aunt Viv and Uncle Phil had no problem putting him in check when they needed to, and it was believable. I mean, they felt like real parents dealing with a kid. To me, it never felt like, well, here's millionaire Will Smith, and here's other actors who were not quite millionaires, but nah, it never felt like that to me, man. Janet Hubert, that played the first Aunt Viv. And this is a very Darren from Bewitched kind of situation, like where you had the two Darrens. I still submit the first Darren was by far the best, in my opinion. The second one was just a little too straight-laced for me, if I'm being honest. So, and of course, Aunt Viv, played by Daphne Maxwell Reid after the fact. I got to be honest, at the time, I don't know that I knew 100% of what happened between Janet Hubert and the minds of the show, the cast, the producers, and everything. But to hear her telling a reunion special, man, it was pretty rough. I mean, how much did you know about this through the years? Did you hear interviews? Did you read stuff? I mean, what all did you know about this?
Well, I read a bunch of stuff after the fact. Of course, after the show was off the air, and you would see little blurbs come out. She would come out and say certain things, or somebody on the cast would shoot a shot at her. It was very volatile for a long time. So just going back to the reunion and just seeing her in the same room with Will Smith is just something I didn't think I would ever see, because their relationship got to the point where it was just really, really bad. So, and I mean, just the way she left the show, it just seemed like it was so messy from the outside looking in. I still don't understand all of the trappings around it and why she ended up leaving the way she did. I gathered there were things like maybe there was a creative control thing, maybe there was a money thing. But again, as I said earlier, Will is the star of the show. So it's like once you kind of make a power grab and you've got this other person that already has that power, like it's just not going to really go in your favor.
And plus, like you said, he's the star of the show. The buck stops here, right? So
Yeah.
Once he made noise about, I don't like this, I'm not happy. When your man's not happy, you make him happy. So yeah. I'm sure the producers felt the pressure from him to make a move. And, according to her, they offered her a renewed contract at substantially lower, to the point that it was an insult to her, which is a shame, because she was an anchor, one of the anchors of that show. She never should have been offered anything less than what she was owed, what she deserved. And
yeah, and I think one of the sad things about the way she exited the show and all of that stuff is sometimes that becomes the narrative, and people forget that she was like multi-talented. I mean, great actress, could sing, could dance. She was incredible.
And dude, talk about looking good. She hasn't aged a day, man. I mean, when I saw her on camera with Will during this special, I was like, oh my God, that's her? Like, it was crazy.
Yeah, she still looks great. Yeah, and I was glad that they could get to a good place, because, like I said, it just got really, really toxic at some point.
Hey, man, if Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels can shake hands, I'm just saying, It's like, if Axl Rose and Slash can make nice, there's hope for anybody out there. So that's good. So Daphne Maxwell Reid, a great actress in her own right. And I was always a fan of her husband, of course, Tim Reid. Venus Flytrap from WKRP, which I grew up watching that show. Still love that show. And he was also Downtown Brown on Simon and Simon, another great show. I'm really showing my age now, but I don't even care.
Here, I'll throw out a more contemporary. The father on Sister Sister.
Oh, see, there you go. I'll take that. Yeah. All right. So was she on that show with him, or didn't they have a sitcom together, him and his wife?
I feel like they have a show together, but I am drawing a blank on it.
I am too. I may be misremembering that because I'm pretty sure they worked together.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank, but she wasn't on Sister Sister. You're thinking of Jack A from 227.
227. Yes, there you go. I love that show too. I used to watch that all the time. Yeah, I would say I don't think they missed a beat when they replaced Janet, but that's not fair to Janet at all. I thought Daphne Maxwell Reid did great. She just, obviously it's going to look different. She's a different person, obviously. She's going to have her own cadence. She's going to have her own mannerisms. She's going to have her own sensibilities. But I don't think they miss anything in terms of, hey, we need an Aunt Viv who can be strong and who can also be funny. I thought she was great, man.
Yeah, the only thing that I kind of look at that looks off about it, and this isn't like my big gripe with it, it just looks kind of weird. It's a bad optic kind of. Is one of the things that's fantastic about the first Aunt Viv is that she's like this strong and beautiful and just dignified, dark-skinned woman. And you didn't see a lot of that on TV. Mm. And so I thought to go from her and then go the same route that everybody kind of does and get like this, light-skinned woman. And that's not a knock to Daphne or to make this a colorist thing. But again, the optic of it just looked like, man, you guys got rid of Janet and like immediately replaced her with a light-skinned woman.
I've never really thought about it in those terms, but now that you say it that way, do you think there was something behind the scenes where they're like, and I don't know how to phrase it, we have to make this more, I don't know what word to use for that. We have to make it more mass appeal, maybe is the way to put it. I don't know. Is that, you think that was a conscious decision on their part?
I don't know. It might have been, but I just think the optic of it just looked bad because it made it look like, you're already, and I think that's why she says on the reunion certain things, and you already put out this this look that, she was difficult, and it just, I don't know. I can't speak to that as well as a black woman probably could, but I can see why women might have looked at that and felt like, wow, this is what you guys are doing. That's kind of hurtful.
And something when you mention all that, something I would throw in there too is that Janet was tall.
Yes.
That she had a commanding presence. That she was as tall as James Avery, I believe. And I don't think Daphne was she? I don't think she was.
Yeah, but it's just everything that comes with what Daphne represents and what Janet represents. And again, that's not to knock Daphne at all, but I feel like what Janet brought to the show as a dark-skinned woman, it was just groundbreaking. And so, if you were going to replace her, I felt like there should have been a way to embrace that. And again, I don't want to make it seem like I'm making this, one is better than the other because of the color of their skin. Of course not. But it's just because what people saw in Janet, and to make her exit so awkward in a way, because you don't acknowledge it on screen anyway. But then it's just kind of like, oh, that's who replaced her?
Right. And they went 3 years with Janet, and then went the final 3 years with Daphne. So it's not like the show tanked
No.
as a result. And a lot of times, man, when you interrupt the flow of your main cast, they don't always survive. And we've seen it so many times over the years where it'll be either a cult favorite or an instant hit, and it's a beloved show, and then you take somebody out of the equation, and then boom, it's what's the old story, man? It's one thing to replace the bass player. It's another thing to replace the lead singer or the lead guitarist. It's a whole different band. And, as a bass player, I can tell you that there's some truth to that, because it's, the bass player typically is not the face of the group. The lead singer, the lead guitarist, even a dynamic drummer. You replace one of the three of them, it's a totally new band. So, I mean, it looked as though, which I don't have numbers in front of me, it looked as though the show didn't miss a beat when they replaced her. But had they replaced anyone else, namely Alfonso Ribeiro, who played Carlton Banks, wow, that would have been massive, because this dude was born. It's almost like they wrote this part for him because he was so freaking good at it.
Yeah, actually, I believe he told a story once where they were talking about replacing him.
Oh,
Which I can't even imagine the show without him. Because so much of the comedy of the show is built around him. And I mean, just what I was saying earlier, and just recognizing certain things about the Black experience through Will. You got such an other side of it that a lot of people don't see that we got through Carlton, because Carlton is just like, well, I mean, race doesn't matter. I'm in a place of privilege, so I've never been in a place where I've been told no. And we get to see him get put in these positions through Will, and just the older he gets as an adult, that they're all learning experiences, and they're kind of teachable moments for other people that are privileged that might not be Black. And you can kind of see, like, oh, this is what you guys mean by this. Like, there's so many relevant episodes because of that. Like the episode where they got arrested because they were whose car were they borrowing? They were borrowing one of Uncle Phil's friend's car, and they were driving it to take it back.
Yeah.
And they assumed they stole a car. Like, and just Carlton's entire reaction to the whole thing is just basically what I have to explain to non-Black friends sometimes.
Right.
And just seeing it on screen, of course, didn't understand it as a kid, but when I got older, I was like, this is brilliant. Like, this is ahead of its time.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that scene when you were mentioning the differences between Carl and Will. I mean, the fact that Will's telling him beat for beat what's going to happen. It's like, put your hands on the wheel. Don't take them out of... He's like, what? What do you mean? What are you talking about? He tries to shake the cop's hand. The cop's like, put your hands on the steering wheel. And he's like, get out of the car, Carlton. He's like, what? He says he's going to tell you to get out of the car. And he's like, this. As soon as he said that, Carl was like, step out of the car, please. And then when Will gets out, and just like he's so pissed off. Remember when he circles around the front, and just throws himself on the hood of the car, like, here, just arrest me. And I can't talk about it without laughing. It's so good. But yeah, man, like you said, man, growing up in Philly, it's different, and it's, we as a parent, as I'm sure every parent is who's worth a damn, you want your kids to have better than what you have. You want them to have a certain lifestyle that maybe you didn't grow up with. I want my son to have what I didn't have as a kid. I didn't have anything as a kid, dude. Me and my mom struggled for most of my life as a child. It was rough going, man. So I want my kid to not have to know certain things. I don't want him to have to know an empty refrigerator. I don't want him to have to know, this is how we duck phone calls from bill collectors, son. Here's how we hide from a knock on the door, because that's what I did for years as a kid. So I could totally relate to everything that was going on in that scene. I could not relate to the color aspect of it, obviously. But seeing all that play out, like you said, dude, completely ahead of its time, especially considering where we are in 2020, when you would think by now we would be much farther along, and it seems like every day we take a step back, unfortunately. So how much of that do you think was, and maybe it's an obvious question and answered, I don't know, but do you think that was, all right, we need to put this in here because of a specific reason, or was it just a story to tell, or Do you think that they knew how important it was for people at home to be seeing the stuff on TV?
I think it was a conscious effort, along with a lot of things from the first few seasons. Because there were black creators behind the show, and they were just like, this is what, this is what our experience is. And it might not have been a conscious effort to go like, this is going to be the police brutality episode, so to speak. But it was kind of like, no, this is our experience. And like, I want to show you what a young black man's experience would be coming from Philadelphia and living in Bel-Air. And so you would have to, in order for it to be real, you'd have to talk about some of those things. And again, like a lot of the things that I thought that were fascinating about Carlton over the years is the way that I connected to him, even though I'm not wealthy like him. I mean, like the episode where he tries to get in a sorority, that is one of my favorite episodes because he gives the speech at the end and it's so on the money. There's also the Carlton's got a gun episode,
right?
And he learned so many lessons through the show that, again, they're never connected to classism. They're always still tied back to his race.
And he wouldn't have learned anything had it not been for Will.
Yeah, and that's one of the best dynamics of the show is just how much he learns from them and just how much they learn from him. For
sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because, he's a street tough kid, thinks he's got it all figured out until he finds out from Phil. I had nothing either. I didn't have the best life growing up. You think that I've always been rich? No chance. So, yeah, man, it's like you said, the word dynamic, so many dynamics at play here. I'll tell you this, my first exposure to Alfonso was the Pepsi commercial with freaking Michael Jackson. All right?
Yes.
I remember as a kid seeing that going, who's the little dude wearing the Michael Jackson jacket? This kid's killing it. And then saw him in Silver Spoons with Rick Schroeder now, I suppose. And I was a major fan of that show. And this is the stuff you remember off the top of your head. Joel Higgins played Rick's dad. And Joel was later in another sitcom called Best in the West, which I have no idea if you can even find it, but I loved it. It was hilarious. It's another podcast. I'm just remembering stuff all of a sudden. But that was my first exposure to him. God, dude, as a little tiny kid, this guy's crazy talented. So he was heading for big things. So when I first saw Fresh Prince, I'm like, that's the kid from Silver Spoons. I knew immediately who it was. And we can't talk about this show without talking about the Carlton dance, which is one of the funniest things ever. And the fact that no one can really do it but him. That's the funny thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's so many things that Alfonso brings to the show. And I mean, it's easy to kind of typecast him and go, well, he was Will's sidekick. But I thought he brought so many different things to the show that are completely unrelated to Will. Like, I mean, they have great chemistry, of course, but like Carlton brings so many iconic things to the show on his own.
Yeah, for sure. And those two characters kind of need each other during the course of that show. It just makes sense. Like you said, one learns from the other. And definitely an interesting dichotomy between those two. So let's talk about Carlton's sister, Hillary, played by Karen Parsons, who does just the bang-up job of all time of being the spoiled, rich, never had to work for anything in her entire life, doesn't understand how money works, can't believe when she gets her first paycheck that there's, what do you mean taxes? And she's like, well, what do you think? How do you think the government, they make road, they build roads and stuff and all this stuff. She's like, well, I just thought the government paid for all that, And she asked who FICA was. Who's that person taking money out of my check? But man, she was, again, I lay it on thick with this cast, but it's another example, I believe, of the right cast being assembled for the right show. She was great. I mean, I thought she felt like a spoiled brat to me. I don't think I ever felt like, well, this is a stretch for this actress. No, dude, it felt like she was exactly what she was portraying on TV.
Yeah, she has several memorable episodes. But like in the beginning, you think she's just like this side vapid character, and she just eventually grows into her own as a fully formed character as well. One of my favorite Hillary episodes is, of course, the one where Will blackmails her.
Yes. That's the one where don't they both blackmail her in that episode?
Yes.
Yes. It's
He's
great.
got you cleaning his room and doing his laundry.
Yeah.
I'm not doing his laundry. Will you do mine?
That's great. That's so good. The way he turns around, he's got that smile, and you're like, oh my God, he's going to do it too. Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark's 6M podcast sent you. Yeah, man, that's great stuff. I mean, she doesn't get enough credit, I don't think. And when they're at the dinner table later and she's having to follow their commands, barking like a dog and giving Will compliments, but then blasting Will at the same time. And oh, that's good stuff, man. She brings something else to the show. I mean, she's very much Carlton in terms of, yeah, she's privileged and she's never had to want for anything in her entire life. But she's also... she's the dumb blonde of the show too, you know, like a lot of the jokes are completely over her head. There'll be stuff right in front of her and she doesn't understand the point of it. So, you know, I don't know if they ever worked all that stuff out of her, or she just kept that charm up till the end of the show. She did learn things along the way, I'm sure, but they kept her as being sort of that dim-witted character, which nothing wrong with that character. I mean, it's comic relief. Sometimes I kind of felt like she was more comic relief than Carlton was, depending on what was happening in that particular episode.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course she, you know, became her own person after a while. She became like a businesswoman. She had her own show and everything towards the end of the show. But yeah, she's just, yeah, there were several episodes where she might not say that much in the episode, but she'll just have one moment that was really funny.
And Jazz just couldn't take his eyes off of her. Always loved her. We got to talk about Jazz too, because every time he spoke, and this is going to sound like an insult, but I don't mean it to. Every time he spoke, you're like, that dude's not an actor. You know what I'm saying? Like there's no inflection. There's nothing behind his line. He just kind of memorized his line. Nothing wrong with that, because he feels like a real character, a real person, instead of, I rehearsed this all night and I'm going to deliver it the way my character would deliver it. No, he just talks. So that's why it's very different when he enters the scene, because they've all got this way of speaking and I'm becoming my character. And then he just walks in and says, hey, what's up? And he's just this normal guy who gets thrown out all the time.
Yeah, it's kind of like he's like this hyper, like he's like a more extreme version of what Will is in this, like, this ridiculous situation they're in. It's like Will gets thrusted in this situation where he's living with a wealthy family, and you think, like, yeah, he's a normal guy from Philly, but Jazz is like a really, really grounded normal guy. And it just, you can see it in the way he walks and he talks, the way he just walks in, and it's like everything is just uncouth.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like if you think like Will is the viewer's eyes of what's going on in Bel-Air, like Jazz is another level behind that. He's like 2-3 more levels behind that.
He always kind of feels like the guy that could get you anything you want. You know what I mean? Like he knows a guy that knows a guy that can get something for you. Whether it's, you know, maybe not quite legal or whatever, he probably knows a guy that can get it. That's just kind of the way he feels. Like, not that he's up to no good, but that, well, if I had to be up to no good, I can make that happen. You know what I mean? So,
yeah, and I mean, yeah, every time I think about Jazz, of course, they always do the iconic handshake when they come in the room.
Yes.
It's just those little things just added so much to the show. Again, it made the show so memorable.
Yeah, and honestly, I'd forgotten that move until I started watching the show again. I was like, God, I really love these two guys together. I mean, there's a reason why they had such chemistry off the set, why they were lifelong friends. And, I mean, it showed every time they're on camera together. And I thought it was interesting when he talked about the final episode of the show when they're all in tears and it's like you're losing your family. I can't believe we're never going to be in the same room together again. And he's like, as soon as my scene was finished, I left the studio, jumped a plane, and went home. I couldn't be involved. I couldn't be around. It was too hard. Which I thought was very revealing for a guy like him who is always so straight-laced and never really breaks at all. But, you kind of felt like, man, this really meant maybe more to him than maybe I even thought it did at the time. Like, he really did take this stuff to heart, man. He was really part of this family.
Yeah, I mean, and when you add that to what he said towards the beginning of the reunion episode when Will told the story about how the show got greenlit, and he was like, yeah, they were on tour, and he came back from tour and was like, hey, Jazz, I got a TV show. And he's just like, what?
Yeah.
And then you compare that to, years later that he's on this journey with him. He's kind of like, man, I don't want to leave either.
Yeah, and he just has to make a clean break. Some people are like that, man. I've known guys like that before. It's just, I need a clean break. I can't hang on. It's too hard. Just rip the Band-Aid off and just close the book, open the next chapter. I can't deal with this. So I respect that. I'm sure it wasn't the easiest thing to do, but I totally respect it. Let's finish talking about the kids here. Tatiana Ali as Ashley Banks. I mean, she is the heart and she's the sweetness and the innocence of the show. Absolutely. She's it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many great things about Ashley in the show. Just like you said, she's the innocence of the show. And then she is just like watching Will like corrupt her from the very first episode.
Right.
In ways it's just hilarious from start to finish.
When she wraps the blessing at the dinner table. And the minute she starts rapping, Will his head just jerks up and his eyes are real huge. He's looking around like, oh my God, I'm in so much trouble. Yeah, she's at that age, man, where she is very, very impressionable. And she starts to look up to him because he's fun and he's funny. And she becomes sort of the sidekick for a while, I felt like. Maybe more than Carlton was, yes?
Yeah, I mean, but I feel like she had her own dynamics at times. But again, this is just, there are so many people on the show, like you said, with Alfonso and how he was just so multi-talented. And just how multi-talented Janet Hubert was when she first came on. And then, like, Tatiana comes on and she can, like, actually sing. And, like, she's got, like, range as an actress. Like, this was, like, a super talented cast.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think you could appreciate it until you saw them all together and reacting and acting off of each other and with each other. And yeah, man, I think they all click so well, and I think she's just an integral part of the show, just as important as any other cast member. I mean, had this been just a dumb little kid actor, no offense to anybody out there, but could barely deliver her lines. We've all seen bad child actors, let's be honest. But this wasn't her. She had a lot of heart, a lot of life in her. I mean, there was just that cliche, bright-eyed innocence. That's what she was. And again, I saw the reunion. I'm like, she doesn't look much different than what she did then. Like, she's still, man, to have found the fountain of youth. I could only dream of that because, man, she looks great still to this day. Didn't she pursue a career as a singer at one point?
Yes. Yes, and I think she had some other shows where she was like the star of the show, but I don't think they were like big shows.
Right.
But yeah, it's so many interesting things I thought she brought to the show. Like, I mean, when she went to high school and she decided, I don't want to go to a prep school, I want to go to a school with normal kids. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of one of those chicken or the egg things. Like, does she make that decision without Will being in the house and showing her what it's like to be around regular kids?
Very true. Great point. Yeah, dude. It's he directly impacted everyone in that house for the better, for the most part, I'd say. Jeffrey Butler, which was his name. It just occurred to me that his last name was Butler. Did they ever give him a last name, or that's just what they end up?
I just know him as Jeffrey. I never knew he had a last name.
That's what it's listed as, Jeffrey Butler. I'm sure that's just got to be a running gag. Like, well, crap, we didn't give him a last name. I just make it Butler. Like, that's great stuff. Joseph Marcel, which, by the way, whatever he's done since then, I've not seen it. And maybe he's been crazy busy as an actor. But if he has, man, I've missed every bit of it because I don't ever remember seeing something going, wait a minute, that's Jeffrey. Like, I don't know. Maybe I've missed his stuff.
I've seen him do small cameos and things, but I haven't seen him do anything big. But from what I understand, he was like a theater actor before the show.
Right.
But Jeffrey is by far the funniest character on the show, in my opinion. He has several episodes where he either there's a main storyline about him that is really funny, or there's a one-liner he makes in the episode that is the funniest thing of the entire episode. The two standouts, of course, is the A Shame of a Nation, where he gets caught cheating in the marathon.
Oh wow, I haven't gotten that far yet. I don't even remember that episode, man.
That is one of the funniest episodes. And then, of course, the Raphael De La Ghetto.
Yes, I love that one. They didn't have him in that character enough. I thought that was great.
Yeah, he is easily the funniest character on the show to me.
I think they missed an opportunity with that gag. There's the classic sitcom where there's a twin, but it's all split screen when they shoot it, and then it's a body double when his back is turned. I think that Jeffrey should have had a brother that was raised by a different father or something, and then he's like this beat poet. I think that would have been great. Just a recurring character. I think they missed the boat with that. That was pretty cool. But yeah, there's some Benson jokes peppered through the first season, and a lot of people won't get those jokes today. I grew up watching Benson. I was a big fan. My mom watched Soap, which Benson spun off of. Richard Guillaume is Benson. That's his name. And there's a lot of elements of that character in Jeffrey, if I'm being honest. It's just that Jeffrey is more piercing with his one-liners. Like, you don't think there's any hatefulness behind his words, but then you kind of question, man, he really was mean when he said that. You know what I mean? So,
but see, the other thing that's funny, and again, this is one of the things, the show is just so revolutionary in some ways, in ways that I just didn't understand until I was older. Because before, you didn't see a lot of shows where the butler was black and the family was also black. So their dynamic with Jeffrey is so different. And just the way he talks to them, just the way they communicate with him, it is just entirely different than anything we've ever seen before.
Yeah, because it's not with a black, and Benson was black with a white family. That's a good point. And, if you wanted to look at that a certain way, in a certain light, you could say, it's a white family with a black butler. Come on, man. Which, there's some validity to that depending on the situation. But that's, like you said, that's not the case here. So this is not, here's a black guy being a butler to a family. No, this is a guy with a job. He's very good at it. He's done it for years. He's an exceptional housekeeper. He's a great butler. And he's valuable. And plus, he's part of our family, which he checks all the boxes, man. He can feel like Will's other uncle or maybe grandfather at some point. But he's also that wisecracking sort of, well, it's just a job. Wish I didn't have to work here kind of stuff.
which reminds me, the other funny Jeffrey episode was the one where he thought he won lotto when Will pranked him with the fake lottery ticket.
Right. It's, I got to finish watching this show, man. I got almost 5.5 seasons left to go here, but I got to get to that episode, man. He's so good. And like I said, he does, and maybe I'm off. Maybe it's just because he's British and has this air about him, but he seems like a classically trained actor.
Yeah, from what I understand, he did theater, and so that's the other thing with all of them, because James Avery is like a serious actor, from what I understand, and a lot of those shows like that where they get TV actors, they get a lot of these serious thespians, and it shows. And I think that definitely showed in James Avery throughout the show that he had like real acting chops.
And the fact that this show was filmed, it wasn't canned laughter. It wasn't, I think Will made the comment, the reunion about, you turn the volume up, then you turn it back down. that's not what they were doing. This was, and I never realized that. I mean, I guess looking back on it, you can see that they're pausing for the laughter to die down. But at the time, I guess I wasn't thinking about it because I'm just used to hearing laughter in a sitcom. But this was a live studio audience. And I'm sure that made a huge difference in how they interacted with each other. I would love to see some gag reels from this show. And I'm sure that maybe on the DVD collections they exist, but I'd love to see some outtakes and stuff like that. I think that'd be great to watch. Just imagine how much fun they had with that live audience, man. It must have been great.
Yeah, I mean, they showed that a little bit in the reunion where they showed the episode where Carlton broke the fourth wall and he was like running through the audience and running back on set and running around. I never thought about it this way, but they make this brilliant comparison on a reunion where they compared it to black theater, and that's exactly what it's like. It doesn't feel like a television show at times. It feels like actual black plays,
like a show.
Yeah.
Yeah, just putting on a show. Yeah, that's a good point, man. Talking about the whole race thing, I had forgotten how the whole white perspective of this show, and again, I'm only into season 1, rewatching it back. But so far, it's been, Phil's law partners are stand-up guys. They seem like good people. They're all, wealthy. I don't think they see Phil as anything but just a regular dude who's a great attorney. And, he's one of, I don't want to say one of them, but you know what I mean? In terms of being a lawyer and a business partner, he's with them. So they don't really see color for him. And most of the white cast so far in season 1 kind of feels like that. They're just sort of on the periphery there. And when you do have interaction with them, they're trying really hard to be cool. Like they're trying to use slang. And I'm like, this has got to be a running joke. Like we got to make all the white guys seem pretty like they're just trying way too hard to be funny. I mean, does it jump out at you? Because it jumps out at me like every time I see it happen.
It does. It does enough that I know that it had to be intentional. Because if you notice, none of Phil's friends ever shunned Will. They all like embraced him in some way. The only one of his friends that I can think of that wasn't that big of a fan of Will was Sherman Hemsley's character when he came on. He's not a white character.
Holy dude, I'd forgotten all about that. I have forgotten all about that. Now I got to go find that episode and watch it.
But yeah, most of them, like, cause the one guy, he was Will was his caddy, and all of them like want to be, and I'm sure there's like some kind of commentary you could take from that all of these wealthy white men and like these guys of affluence or privilege wanted to be seen as cool in Will's eyes. There's got to be some kind of intentional commentary there that I just haven't. I don't know how to express it, or I haven't picked up on it yet.
Well, it's a very Blazing Saddles kind of comparison. You know what I mean? Where Sheriff Bart is the coolest guy in the entire film, and all the white people are stupid as rocks, and they are. But that's the commentary, and it's like, well, the N-word's thrown around a lot, and it's racist. I'm like, this is not a racist film. This is a comedy. The most insulting people in this movie are the white people, and they're nimrods. They're all morons and idiots. And that's the joke, is that he's the smartest guy in town. He's the coolest. Everybody around them are idiots, which I think is kind of the same thing going on here in some form. How does that fly with you from your perspective? Are you okay with that? Hey man, it's just a comedy. I don't care. I mean, is there another way you would rather see something depicted, or is it too on the nose the way they did it in Fresh Prince?
No, I for the most part, I thought all of it went well. I mean, again, if you look at the episode where they got arrested and Phil and Viv get there and they're upset, but their friend gets there and he's kind of like, well, it's my car, guys. What are we doing? And he's kind of looking around like, what is this? And like, meanwhile, Will and Viv and Uncle Phil are kind of looking like, yeah, this is what it is. Like, this is what life is for us.
Yeah, like it's not a yeah, and the fact that they all go to bed at the end of that episode, and Carlton's still up, like asking himself the question, if I were a cop, I would have done the same thing. I would have, like, don't cops do the right thing? And they're all looking at him like, you got to be out of your mind. Do you not know what happened tonight? You don't get it. And he seems to be the only one that doesn't understand it. So,
Ah, man, I totally forgot about that. And that is, again, that's just one of the brilliant things about the show is the fact that there's no happy ending to that episode. It just kind of ends with Carlton like, I would have pulled us over, I guess.
right.
And it just leaves that open-ended question.
Yeah, because like you said, there's no easy answers. Then it fades out with no music and just rolls the credits. And you
Yeah,
can,
and
yeah.
yeah, and they did quite a few episodes like that where they would touch on something like that, and then there was no happy ending to the episode, and there was nobody to come at the end to kind of tell you what the message is of the show. It just left it open ended.
Yeah, because as silly as this show is, when they touch on real life issues, there's never a good answer. There's never anything easy about real life. It's not always fun and games. So when they get to episodes like that, yeah, it's hard to sort of bring it home. I guess if you had to make the case for the other direction, had they gone too heavy-handed in the other direction, and every white character they ran into was a jerk, a racist, looked down his nose at them. Had they done that too much,
Yeah.
you see what I mean? That would have come off like, I don't know how that would have come off. I guess too much in either direction would have been too much. But it felt like, whether they knew it or not, they found a good balance, because there's occasionally that voice of dissension, I guess you could say. But for the most part, it just feels like, I don't know. It feels like the drama of the show is whatever the drama is in that family. And occasionally the outside world will have an impact on what they're going through, which is a different experience. If they were to produce this sitcom now in 2020, dude, it's a different show, right?
Yeah, and I mean, that's why I'm saying like that episode where they got arrested, it's still so very relevant. And I mean, that just goes to show just how smart the show was. And it never tried to talk down to you. It never tried to get on network television and kind of tell a non-black audience like, hey, this is how terrible white people is. It's like, no, like, I want you guys to see it. I want you guys to kind of understand and relate.
Yeah, and at the time, I don't know how many TV shows were even going in that direction. How many of them were really even talking about it? I mean, you had shows like Rock, which touched on it later on. I think Rock was later than Fresh Prince, wasn't it? I think
it was around that same time in the 90s. I think it was on at least at the same time as Fresh Prince at one point, but I think Fresh Prince predates it.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I mean, there were shows that kind of tackled serious things, but I would say maybe because this was the one that I really, really grew up with, that there were so many things that I learned from this show, and there were so many things that I watch back to this day and still cry about. And it's just, I mean, that's just like I said, just how well the show was made. It wasn't just a comedy. It wasn't just, drama all the time. It did the best of both.
Man, you mentioned the crying stuff, man. And you know where I'm going with this. The episode with Will's father is, to this day, one of the hardest things I've ever watched. I lost my dad at a very young age, and he was a good dad, and nothing, no drama there, just taken way too soon. So anytime I watch anything, whether it's a sitcom or, dude, if there's a father-son relationship happening, if it gets powerful, I'm just a mess. So they played that part back on the reunion show, dude, and I was losing it in my chair, man. I was like, oh, dude, here we go again, because Will is freaking great in that scene. You just feel his heartbreak, man. Like when he looks at Phil and says, how come he don't want me, man? Oh, dude, that's a killer. That's a killer.
Yeah. And I mean, that stuff was already sad in itself because they were covering all the James Avery stuff, and the James Avery stuff in the reunion is so emotional.
Yes.
Just how much he meant to them. When they're all going over just things that he taught them about jazz and just everything. Yeah, but yeah, that scene in itself. My parents got a divorce. So my dad wasn't around a lot when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
So that scene, I related to that more than any depiction of anybody's, relationship with their father at the time. And that isn't to say that my dad was as bad as that, but my dad at that time was definitely in and out of my life because we didn't live in the same house. And I would go long periods of time and I wouldn't see him. And it would definitely feel like that sometimes. So, I would see him and then sometimes it would just be like, how come he doesn't want to be here like I want him to be here?
Right.
And, again, that might not be because he didn't want to be here. Those are of course things you learn. You get older and you become an adult and you learn that your dad is, a normal person too. Like he's not just your dad. But yeah, at the time, like, yeah, it just is still very hard for me to watch. It's still one of those things that I immediately connected with Will because it was like, no, like even if you have people in your life that want to be a father for you, like Uncle Phil was, he's not your dad.
Yeah, I mean, he became a surrogate father for him, obviously, but yeah, it's a different relationship. And another show that just popped into my head that does a lot of the same balancing act was Good Times, where it could be slapstick comedy because of JJ. He's the Fresh Prince of that show, right? Because of the comedy, because he's the coolest guy on the show. But then you have the serious characters around him, and then you have the sometimes the funny white people who are trying to be cool. But then you have real life. JJ gets shot. I'll never forget the episode JJ gets shot. That's a whole other podcast. But, oh my God, I was a kid. I was a wreck, dude. I'm like, oh my God, they shot JJ because he was the coolest thing ever. And, yeah, like they balanced it too. They balanced it. I mean, the scene, it's off topic, man, but the scene in the kitchen when she loses it after James was killed off the show and she broke the plate and she's cursing as loud as she can. I'm like, oh my God, dude. Again, loss. That's anytime that there's something that's, contains loss, it hits home for me every time. So, I mean, that's why one of the reasons I think that show was so successful and why Fresh Prince was so successful because it made a connection because people, like you said, not only laughed, but they cried. They felt something for it. Dude, when we started this show, almost from the jump, I told you I felt like they could, I don't want to say redo it because that suggests recasting the whole thing, but I think there's something to be said for a show with Will as the Uncle Phil in the Uncle Phil, slot, and he's now all grown up and he's raising kids in 2020, and it's a different animal, and maybe he's moved back to Philly. That would be cool, and I think there's something to be said for that, dude. I would love to see that. I'd watch the life out of that show, man. That'd be fun to watch, dude. I wonder how many conversations have been had behind the scenes, if he's interested, if he's ever taken it seriously. I wonder if that's ever going to happen.
I have to imagine, depending on how well this reunion special does on HBO Max, I have to imagine those numbers come in and those talks are going to get amped up. If there aren't any talks in place already. But yeah, I mean, there's so many things, and I had completely forgot until you mentioned that JJ got shot. Like I mentioned the Carlton's Got a Gun episode, but one of the things I didn't grasp until I got older in the episode, and like Will got shot in the episode earlier.
Right.
Somebody tried to rob him at a teller, and I think there's so many things because that's another one of those episodes that makes me cry when I watch it because I think they say it without saying it that Carlton has a gun and Carlton is frustrated and he has all this, thoughts that I'm going to carry around a gun because I need it. And Will doesn't say it, but he's just like, no, I know people like that. I know people like that, and that's not who you are. Like your parents raised you in a way that you don't have to be where I'm from. That's why I'm here.
Right.
And I never thought about it that way until I rewatched it one day when I was older.
And well, like you said, man, it's making you think. It's hitting home for you, like it hits home for a lot of people, which is, I think, part of the magic of this show. It could have just been, like we said from the outset of this episode, man. It could have just been, this is to get Will over. It's to make him a hit. It's to make him successful. We're going to put this kid on the map, make him a millionaire. Yeah, but all that stuff happened, obviously. But it did a whole lot more than that. It was so important for its time. And I think Alfonso said it best when he said that it was a groundbreaking show. It was perfect for its time. And it was, he said they set the tone for every sitcom that followed it. And they did, really.
For sure.
I mean, what show can you actually say, especially with an African-American cast, that how many of those shows got a break or got a second look or got on TV or all the above because of Fresh Prince? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, of course, you'd have to say Cosby Show is up there as influential as well. But yeah, I would say that Fresh Prince, it just changed so much at the time.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And, there should be shows like that. And it came along at the right time. As most successful shows do, they just seem to fit and they seem to pop at the right moment, which I think that everything just kind of slid into place for this cast and for Will especially. And I've been a fan of Will ever since. I mean, there's been very few things that he's done I've not been a fan of. We won't talk about Wild Wild West. I know you were thinking it. It's a train wreck.
He's got some duds on his resume, but I mean, even then, I could have never imagined just how big he would become. And I mean, when he was having a conversation with Janet and they were hashing the things out, and she just was kind of like, we all saw it. You were destined to be a star. We all saw it. And it's kind of like, yeah, I mean, when you really do really think about it and you see just how he carried that show at times and just how he carried some scenes he was in, yeah, you could kind of see it. And I mean, once he got that first real role, like, I mean, he had done action roles and he had done like the goofy humor roles, but when I saw him in Ali, that's when I really understood, like, no, this guy is an actor. Like, he's the guy.
Yeah, Ali. Wow, what a departure. It's almost like it's not even the same guy, right? But
yes,
I thought Pursuit of Happiness was much better than some of the reviews I read. I thought it was the scene of him in the bathroom trying to keep the door closed with his son. He's crying his eyes out. I mean, dude, it's so good, man.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely one of my favorite movies. A funny story. So when I got started at Bleacher Report, I had been writing for a while and I hadn't gotten like I hadn't gotten paid gigs here and there, but everything going on with coronavirus and everything, it's just kind of like, it just kind of felt like the walls are closing in. Like, oh my God, I've got to figure out something where I'm doing something, or I got to figure out how I'm gonna do like a everyday job.
Mm-hmm.
So when I got the Bleacher Report job, it was just kind of like, I felt like that same way where Gardner walks out and he's like tearing up and he's clapping hard. It's like, no, I can do this. Like, I just need an opportunity.
Yeah, another example of how Will Smith plays a character that you connect to and it's a story you can relate to. And, yeah. I mean, I'm thinking of his blockbusters, I'm thinking of Independence Day, obviously. Which, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't that the breakout role after Fresh Prince? Was Independence Day?
Was Bad Boys before Independence Day?
That's a good question. Maybe you're right.
I think Bad Boys was the first one, and I think Independence Day was the second movie.
Yeah.
And then he had Men in Black, because he had like 3 major hits, like back to back to back. I think Wild Wild West was like some years after that, but like at some point it just seemed like he could do no wrong because he had like 3 major hits on his resume. I really liked 7 Pounds too. That was another serious role he's in.
I have not watched that, but I intend on watching it. I've just not gotten around to it yet. Did you like Hancock? You're a comic book guy. Did you like Hancock?
I did. There are parts of the story that I'm kind of like, that doesn't really work, but
right.
All of the stuff where he's just fun. He's just being funny, and he's being like the drunk, down on his luck hero at the beginning. All of that stuff is fantastic.
When he's flying drunk and he's wearing that toboggan and those sunglasses and he's like just flying crooked and whatnot with that bottle, I'm like, dude, come on, it's great.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's fantastic in a lot of things in that shouldn't be good. Like even when you talk about Wild Wild West, how bad Wild Wild West is, there are scenes in this thing where he is just carrying this thing. Like I mean, Suicide Squad as well. There are parts of Suicide Squad that he's in that you're looking around like this is not a very good movie, but
Right.
he's great in it.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. He's very good. He's just yeah, you put a good actor in a bad movie, the good actor is always going to stand out. He's going to be the thing you remember the most because the rest of the movie was freaking terrible. So
he always looks like a star to me, and even some of his bad movies, he just feels like a star. He feels like the biggest star in the movie. I mean, even I Am Legend, he carries that entire movie literally by himself.
Yeah.
He's doing all the scenes by himself, and he's just great in it.
Yeah, no kidding. I'd forgotten all about I Am Legend. That's great stuff, man. Yeah, he. I like the fact that he. I don't know. Maybe this sounds odd, but in 2020 at least, I don't recall a time where I'm like, oh, another Will Smith movie. It just doesn't feel like he's been overexposed. Maybe it's a different time period. If this were early 2000s, I wouldn't be saying this. I don't know, but I don't recall a time ever saying, God, man, enough with this guy, because I never felt like it was too much. I felt like his movies came at the right time, and it was like, here's this hit, now 2 years later, here's another hit. It wasn't like, I don't know. I guess too much of any good thing is going to be too much, right? But it never felt like, all due respect, Jim Carrey, that was so forced at one point. It just felt like, and I love Jim to death, but like, oh my God, enough. But I think Will has, I mean, and let's face it, man, I'm sure at a point financially, because I think, doesn't he still have his own production company, I believe?
I think so.
I'm
not sure.
Wasn't he and his wife producing a show at one point, I think?
Yes. They were producing a sitcom at some point.
That's right.
And it was loosely based on their marriage because that was his second marriage.
Ah. That sounds right, yeah. But I mean, maybe you got a different take. Has it ever felt like he was just overexposed to the point of just, okay, this is too much, you need to reel it back a bit? Do you know what I mean?
I never felt like he was overexposed, but just watching him go from this guy that had all of the surroundings of a movie star, because at some point he changed from being like what we know him as in Fresh Prince to being like a movie star and having like the life that we only see, like the publicity stuff. We only see him do the interviews and do all of the red carpet stuff. And now he's doing this thing where he's on social media more. You see him talking more, and you see him like actually letting more stuff about his actual life out. And that's kind of interesting to me because I'm just not used to that. Like, because we're used to him being so, you know, he controls so much of what gets out there.
That's very true. Yeah, that's a good point. I've never thought about it like that. But he's at a point in his career where he's got that luxury that he doesn't have to work all the time. I assume he doesn't have to do certain things, but now if he does something, he does it because he loves it, because he really wants to do it, as opposed to, you know, feeling like, oh man, I got to put some money in the bank, I got to pay for a new house or something. I mean, it just doesn't feel like that. I want him to be successful. I don't know. It's just when you have connections to people that you admire and appreciate, who are crazy talented, you want to see them do well. I don't know. Like he's doing better than I'll probably ever will financially, to be honest. Right? I mean, never say never, kids, but you know, at this point in my life, yeah, he's probably outdone me. So, but no, dude, I don't know. I want to see a guy like that because I know he came from nothing, for real. Not just a TV show character. I mean, he came from nothing. So I want to see a guy like that be successful. I don't know. So I would love to see, like I said, the second coming of Fresh Prince. I think that would be freaking awesome. And maybe one day we'll get that. And I look forward to continuing down the journey of watching the show again because I'm remembering certain episodes and forgot all about certain other episodes, but I'm loving every second of it. So I think this is definitely one of those time capsule TV shows that should never be forgotten because of all the good it did. So if you can sum it up for me, give me your last word on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Probably my favorite sitcom of that era is probably in my opinion, one of the most iconic sitcoms ever.
Absolutely. I can't say much better than that. I think we both gushed pretty well over this show, and it deserves it, man. It's entertaining. If anyone's listening to this podcast, you're only just barely familiar with it, go out of your way to see it. It is on HBO Max. The entire show's on there. So go pay the small streaming service amount, kick off another streaming service. If you can't afford it, make it happen. Besides, you get to see Wonder Woman 84 when it drops anyway, so that'll be fun. So, yeah, it's like I said, man, it's an enjoyable show. It's fun. Got a lot of heart to it. I love the cast to death. I love to see all these guys. I love to see them all back on the reunion special. Hope we see them all again. Hopefully in another edition of Fresh Prince. That would be great too. I'm looking forward to anything that comes next. And that is the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.